Hey everyone, I'm Lomi and this big guy is Rune. If you've been watching my channel for a bit, you know he was my very first BJD. He's still my favorite, he's probably always going to be my favorite, but looking back on the 8 years we've spent together, there are definitely a few things that I would do different if I was getting this doll over again today. In the past, everything I've talked about has been customization, how you can make dolls into what you want, and sometimes what you start with isn't really what you wanted to begin with. When I joined the hobby in 2010, this guy was my doll of choice. I worked really hard for him. My dad ended up buying him as a gift because I had never been a doll person, and he was really excited about the opportunity to buy me a doll even though I was an adult. If you haven't seen my other videos, then Rune is an Impulhouse EID Luo who has been pretty heavily modified. He has custom sculpted hands, his face has been altered, and he has feet from Zoom Manzo. When I got Rune all those years ago, there were actually only 3 face sculpts available for the EID guys. So for him, I ended up just going with the one that was the manliest because I thought the others were way too soft for the character. The first thing I would do differently about buying this doll now is that I would have waited until there were more resin options available. When I got him, there were only 2 options. There was normal resin and there was white resin. The real skin resin was only available during special events, like the initial launch of dolls and only certain dolls. I got Rune in normal, but if I had it to do over, he would definitely be real skin, because he is way too pale. As a character, he's a native islander, so he should be pretty tan. It makes sense for Feral to be pale because she's a descendant from immigrants, so she would be a lot fairer than he is. But he's the same color as all the other characters from off the island, and that doesn't really make sense for the character. Even though I think he's very pretty after his face modifications, I would probably also either wait for a different head sculpt, or I would have started sculpting his custom head a long time ago too. I've been working on it for months and months, more than a year, but I don't have his faceplate printed yet. I've been doing it with 3D sculpting. It's not really my area of expertise, but I like where it's at right now. I just need to get it printed. Then I need to figure out the mechanics for the faceplate, how I'm going to attach the ears because I want them to be removable, what the shape of the head back is going to be, if I'm going to use magnets or some kind of catch. Basically, that would be a lot easier if I had started a little bit sooner. In respect to the resin color, another thing that I would have done differently was that if I had gotten him at the same time and was only able to get him in normal resin, I probably would have dyed him. Dyeing him is still an option now, but you know, he's 8 years old now, he's heavily yellowed. I would want to sand the seams first, and there's just no way to get a really pretty, even result for a dyed tan on a doll that's been sanded after 8 years. I would have to sand his entire body, and that's a little bit more work than I'm ready to do right now. I will probably still sand him and dye him at some point, I just don't know when it's going to be. It would have been easier if I had been braver and had done that really early on in the hobby. And then there are all of his modifications. I'm mostly happy with how they turned out, although the paint and the resin that I used to seal the paint did not hold up very well. But if I had it to do over, instead of trying to modify the Zoom Manzo parts to fit onto his default legs, I would have just bought the whole Zoom Manzo gargoyle body. That body was made to work with the parts, so it would have posed a lot better. It would have made my life a whole lot easier because then all I would have had to do was switch out the hands. I could have kept this body as his human body so that I wouldn't have to worry about switching back and forth, because I do like him to have human parts for photos sometimes, even though that's not canon for the character. But my biggest dissatisfaction with him is the posing in his legs and how difficult it is to get him to stand, even with all the modifications I did. So in retrospect, it would definitely have been worth it to go ahead and get the second body. But since I didn't do that, and I stuck myself with these modified parts, if I had those to do over instead of painting them, I would have dyed them. Dyeing them now is unfortunately not really an option because he's been painted with automotive primer. That stuff does not come off. I would have to spend an eternity sanding his feet to get the primer back off. It gives beautiful paint jobs, but they're meant to be permanent, and they're pretty permanent. If not for the snowflaking problem that I had in the resin top coat, I would never touch his feet again. Case in point, here's what I'm talking about. His ankles are a high friction point, and you can see that after more than a year, the paint has not rubbed off at all. However, there are some places where the resin has bubbled over the top of the paint, especially on the feet. It doesn't really show in camera, but you can see some lighter places here. That's where it's bubbling up, and it's going to have to be stripped off and redone. Another thing that I would have done for him a lot earlier on would be make his LED eyes. If I had any idea how easy that project was going to be, I would have done that within the first week of getting the doll. Instead, I spent a lot of time and money trying to find urethane eyes that worked. I tried glow-in-the-dark eyes, I tried glass eyes, I had a whole box full of acrylic eyes, and this whole time I could have very easily made myself a pair of LED eyes for $20. So I guess at this point, basically what I'm saying is that if I did this now, he would be a completely different doll. Despite that, I don't see myself ever parting with this version of him. He'll end up being changed some more in the next year. I'm going to redo his modifications to try to improve the posing of his legs. I'm probably going to try to dye his body at some point to see if I can give him that tan. I'm going to redo the blushing on his legs using lacquer paints instead of acrylics to see if that reacts better with the resin that I used. And of course he'll be getting his new face. I'm going to keep this one though just in case I end up not liking my own work. I think your wig needs a touch up too, buddy. Is that dog hair? Ugh. Oh, another thing I would do differently is I would actually pierce his ears. That's something that I'm probably going to do in the coming year because it's really simple and I don't know why I never did it before. But I'm always knocking off his earrings and my life will be so much easier if they just go through the ear and are attached. When making his LED eyes, I think if I was doing it over again, I would try to turn a white LED purple instead of working with the purple LEDs. Because that way I could use a smaller battery than this one. Because this battery setup is so big that it has to come out the back of his head and he always has these wires hanging down his back. I try to sew pockets on the inside of his shirts so that the battery can go down inside the shirt, but most of the time it's just kind of hanging out in the back and it would be a whole lot easier if that was enclosed in his head cap. And I think that's pretty much it. We've been through a lot together in the past 8 years, but we still have a lot to do. And sooner or later, this guy is going to be exactly what I wanted in the beginning. We're just going to have to chop you up a whole lot more to make that happen, huh? That would be a really scary thing to say in any other situation. So yeah, there you go. My first time trying to do a doll vlog, and it might be the last time because I am really not comfortable in front of the camera. But that's it for us today. If you still have your first doll or an old doll that you would do differently if you were doing it starting today, drop a note in the comments and let me know what you would do differently. Thanks for watching. See you next time.